Okay, this is good. Got about 1.5 minutes till we bring the studio in. We will be working on getting all of the streaming services up. D Live is good to go. We'll bring Foxhole on in about 2 minutes, and we will bring the Truth Frequency Radio Network in about 1 minute. Yes, I know. It is July 4th. It's wonderful. It's one of my favorite celebrations of the year. We work so hard over the last 245 years to keep this country free and based upon liberty. Those are features of a nation that have never existed before this country. Should they cease to exist here, they will never exist again. So 30 seconds, we'll bring Truth Frequency Radio Network in, and we will begin tonight's epic program. Are you ready? Here we go.
Speaking from a nearby warming. At that time, they were just using microbes. Wilson said he hasn't felt so rejected since that squirrel and peanuts incident last year, and has reportedly gone back to his car to get some saltine crackers out of the glove compartment. Cincinnati, Ohio, developed a crisis that lasted the duration of the Metro line commute from Seven Hills Road to downtown. The 25-year-old Perry was admittedly more than just a bit smitten as he stared at the petite, bookish brunette sitting 2 seats ahead of him.
Oh my God, she was stunning. And she was Dostoevsky.
Goddard was briefly saddened by the woman's exit from the bus 2 stops before his own, and resolved to get out on Court Street and find someone else. Doyle Redland for the Onion Radio News, online at theonion.com.
You are now tuned into the Truth Frequency.
We are TFR. TFR.
Truth Frequency Radio.
Here we go, hour 1. And greetings, Earth Explorers. Welcome to X Squared Radio. I'm your host, Brooks Agnew, coming to you live from an undisclosed location east of the Appalachian Mountains. This is where the past meets the future. We might go a little past your imagination, but have no fear. You will be safely traveling with us. I hope you're having a nice extended weekend. I would like to call it a holiday weekend, but we might discuss that a little bit tonight, whether or not it is still a holiday or not. We have a lot to go over tonight. First of all, I would, as the chat room fills up and people are coming on from all over, we're streaming live through the Truth Frequency Radio Network, which is where the Truth Freaks hang out. We are not afraid to let our Truth Freak flag fly. And if you follow me on all social media, it will treat, cure, and prevent the disease of ignorance. We are also streaming live through YouTube, Twitter, DLive, Facebook, Twitch, and Foxhole. And we love our listeners at Foxhole and DLive, and we treat them well. We cherish every single one of you. Without you, we would not be here. Yes, Top Drifter, absolutely. I will be here on Independence Day if it's Sunday. If you remember last year, I put out a really short video about, where I was burning my mask, and I think I reposted that on Facebook too. I thought that was pretty interesting. It took a year for us to break free, but we did it. We did it. All right. There's a lot of things going on globally, cosmically, galactically, and locally. So we're going to try to cover all that tonight. Don't forget, our phone lines are open, and I think I'll leave them open all night because it's a special night. 213-233-3998. 213-233-3998. And tonight is Ask Me Anything. I don't care if it's on topic, off topic. You can ask me anything. If I don't know the answer, well, we won't even finish that sentence. Let's talk a little bit about global tax. You've been hearing the rumblings out there for quite some time, but we have never actually heard it from a president. We've heard it from the UN. We've heard it from the World Economic Forum. We've heard it from Christine Lagarde. Hey, we have to have more money, to run our show. And the only place to get it is when they say global, they mean America. We would be the ones paying the tax. They would be the ones spending the tax. So President Biden's plan. Wow, I messed up, didn't I? Let's just rewind that a little bit. Virtual Joe and his band of criminals plan to establish a worldwide minimum corporate tax. And it has now got the support of 130 countries, of course, including China and India, who actually probably would not be paying any tax. So Treasury Secretary, who used to be the Fed chair, Janet Yellen, a proud card-carrying member of Virtual Joe and his gang of criminals, who has been leading the United States effort to have a global minimum tax of at least 15% of what I have no idea. 15% of what, Janet? 15% of everything that comes in the front door? 15% of everything that's left after we pay all the rest of our taxes and bills? 15% profit? 15% after donations? What 15%? Who in the hell is making 15% in this country? Nobody. Anyway, she made the announcement a couple of days ago when the agreement among the countries was made official. Now, I would say of the 130 countries that signed on to this deal, 4 are actually going to be paying the tax. I don't know what kind of benefit they're going to get from it, but I will figure it out, and I will share it with you. She said, today's agreement by 130 countries representing more than 90% of global GDP, that's global domestic product, is a clear sign America will enter a competition that we can win, one judged on the skill of our workers and the strength of our infrastructure. I see. We have a chance to now build a global and domestic tax system that lets American workers and businesses compete and win in the world economy. Wow. What a bunch of word salad bullshit. Wow. The two-step framework plan was, you know what that means, two-step, right? That means roll over and insert the nipple. That's what it means. The two-step framework plan was coordinated by the Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development. That would be the OECD. The first part allows countries the right to tax roughly $100 billion in multinational profits on companies that do business within their borders. So if there are Japanese companies doing business in the United States, boom, taxed. If there are American companies doing business in China, boom, taxed. You see what I'm saying? All those cars made in Mexico, all those Fords made in Turkey, boom, they pay the tax. The second part, this is the insert the nipple part. The second part supports implementing a 15% global minimum tax. Minimum, you notice there's no maximum. Could be 90%, could be 105%. We don't know, but it's going to be at least 15%. So they're going to expand the sphincter 15%, which the organization estimates would generate roughly $150 billion a year in revenues, which basically means we would have 10 to 15 more George Soroses every year. Are you ready? Are you ready for that? We'll keep you posted on it. And there's also some news in astrophysics from the journal Physical Review Letters. A lot of you don't like reading this stuff, do you? Well, I like it. I read it. Then black holes. So there's a group of scientists this week, and they announced that they had confirmed a theory that was proposed quite a long time ago. I would say maybe 24 years ago. Maybe it was 23 years ago, by Stephen Hawking. Now, Stephen Hawking was a widely respected physicist, to be sure. He was controversial on a couple of things. But this is regarding the physical properties of black holes. Now, Einstein is the guy that kind of theorized that black holes could exist, that so much mass could be accumulated in one spot in space, that the acceleration of gravity would be so high that even photons of light could not escape. And that there was this threshold they called an event horizon. Once you passed it, there was no way to get back. Now, the nice thing about the way Einstein thought about gravity, which was a little bit like a bowling ball being put into the middle of a bed sheet, and four guys, or in this case, women, maybe, pulled the corners of that bed sheet as tight as they possibly could, but you cannot get the bed sheet flat because the bowling ball sags in the middle of the bed sheet. That's gravity, okay? Gravity, when mass accumulates in a small space, in space, it tends to warp space-time. It warps the fabric of space-time, just like the bowling ball warps the fabric of the sheet. Now, Einstein said that once you got to a certain amount of mass, about 4 to 10 times the mass of our sun, that's a lot of mass in one place. And the gravity would begin to crush in on itself. It would be sort of self-perpetuating. And it would get to a point where that bowling ball, let's say it's a 16-pound bowling ball, that's pretty hard to take a bed sheet and pull it tight with a 16-pound bowling ball. But a 16-pound bowling ball is a bowling ball. It's got a fixed diameter, right? But let's suppose that 16-pound bowling ball was the size of a BB. Yeah, a little, like a BB like you'd shoot out of an air pistol or air rifle. Let's suppose that weighed 16 pounds. Well, now it's a little bit sort of like taking a 16-pound steel rod and standing it on the bed sheet. Well, it would probably punch a hole right through the bed sheet if the fabric could take it. It's definitely going to leave a very sharp funnel-like depression in that bed sheet. That's what Einstein said happened. Now, Stephen Hawking took this a little bit further because he said, well, if it's pulling our universe down like that, then it's also got to be pulling another universe toward it as well. So it becomes kind of a bridge, a funnel squeezed together in the middle. We used to call it an Einstein-Rosen bridge, but now we just call it a wormhole. And what Stephen Hawking said was that theoretically, if a photon wandered, through space and got close to that event horizon, not crossing it, but close to it, that it would clone itself. The photon would literally clone itself, and the clone would fall into the black hole. And it was from this that he surmised that our universe is actually leaking into another universe. Well, it was a brilliant thought experiment, to be sure. But this is just the behavior of black holes. And I know there were those of us that I wrote a paper that said, well, if that's true, if the photons are leaking out of our universe into another universe, then isn't the inverse possible? What if there's a black hole in another universe, and that photon in that universe clones itself and leaks into our universe? So you see, it's a trade of photons between universes, using black holes as the gravity pinpoints or gravity wormholes that connect the two universes. Now, of course, we all know that photons carry information. Yes, some of it's basic, like, what atom did you come from? Is your star rotating or not rotating? Is the star moving toward us or away from us? All of that data, of course, but there's other information that these photons carry. So basically, well, not basically, absolutely what we're looking at is an exchange of information between universes. Kind of interesting, huh? I mean, no telling where you can go from there. And that's what makes the Birth Trilogy so interesting. But anyway, the theorem about the actual physical properties of the black hole was quite fascinating, and it has fascinated physicists for a long time. And then here comes this physical review letter, and they proposed, the theorem was proposed by Hawking 5 decades ago in 1971, and it holds that the event horizon of a black hole, the boundary within which nothing in the universe can escape the gravity of the astronomical object, can never shrink, and it can only grow larger. And that is true. That is true. It grows larger by a small ratio compared to the amount of mass that it consumes. So let's say it consumes a Jupiter. Well, you would think, wow, the diameter of this thing is going to hugely expand. Not so. Not so. Because the gravity is so intense, and what happens is the black hole, in order to conserve its momentum, will spin even faster. The more mass that it accumulates, the faster it spins. And it will always spin at its maximum speed. And that's why, never's a long time. It will never grow smaller. It could explode, but it's never going to go smaller. So the scientists, to test the theory, they examined the data of gravitational waves, which we have learned a lot about since the construction of the two operational laser interferometer gravitational wave observatories, one in Hanford, Washington, one in Livingston, Louisiana. There's a third one in Pisa, Italy, but it is not operated, at least in coordination with the other two, since it was built. It operates independently by itself, and it's been shut down for over a year because of the made-for-TV virus. So they've been studying these gravitational waves, a long postulated phenomenon first detected in 2015 from the merger of two black holes. They reported confirmation of that finding with a 95% confidence interval, and they won the Nobel Prize for doing it. That was years after I went to the facilities. I went to the first one in 2008, and I went to the second one in 2011. And they were not ready yet. They were operational independently, but they hadn't connected the two together because they needed fiber optics all the way, and they needed better switching computers, which they were upgrading to. So the researchers also said that data from the gravitational waves was consistent with the same remnant mass and spin, very important properties, in the merged black hole, an observation in agreement with general relativity. First three laws of thermodynamics obeyed. So that was kind of cool, just an interesting paper. I thought you guys would find that interesting. Also, along with this, astronomers conducting surveys of relatively close star systems. They claim that numerous theoretical alien civilizations may have already received Earth's broadcasts, with an even larger number of star systems also capable of detecting Earth's presence in our solar system just from our radioactivity. Now, admittedly, this goes back a ways. It might go back to the turn of the century. It might go back to the early 20s or 30s when we started broadcasting. In the 40s when we started broadcasting radar and radio and, all of those waves, they go out in space and they never stop. Of course, you're going to be pretty weak because they do dissipate. They're not laser or polarized in the sense that they stay a nice tight signal for light years away. They expand. And so it could just blend into the noise of, every other noisy thing in the universe. And they might not really even know where it came from. I don't think we would if we caught a radio signal that far away, that weak. But in an article published this week in Nature, the researchers claim that over 1,700 star systems in Earth's, let's call it, cosmic neighborhood, are in the right position to have spotted life on a transiting Earth since early human civilization, about 5,000 years ago. Now, scientists are currently working to fine-tune methods to detect signs of life in planets trillions and trillions of miles away. The paper in Nature asserts that alien civilizations that have already developed this technology could have observed Earth's bioindicators for many years. The astronomers also calculated how many nearby star systems may have been able to detect human-generated radio waves from Earth. Those waves, they note, have only been broadcasting for a scant fraction of humanity's presence on this planet, maybe the last 80 or 90 years, so even at the speed of light, that's not really far out in the universe. I quote from the paper, they said, we found that human-made radio waves have already swept over 75 of the closest stars on our list. A full 29 planets in their stars' habitable zones may have been able to detect both radio waves from Earth and the presence of Earth itself. Then they have to build a ship, then they have to get a budget, then they have to make a plan, and then they have to find somebody that can live for 90 years if they happen to be traveling at the speed of light to get here. I doubt they can travel the speed of light, so we're probably looking at around 300 or 400 years to get here. All right, let's see where we are. We have about 6 minutes left in this segment. Let me check the phone boards. Nothing there. Remember, the phone lines are open, 213-233-3998. You're listening on any of the other services, you could just dial on your cell phone, 213-233-3998, and we'll talk about anything. I'll give you 3, 4, 5 minutes, and if you're really interesting, 6 minutes, and we'll see where it goes from there. I'm just making the offer, okay? And thanks everyone out there for listening in. It is the 4th of July. A lot of people are doing a lot of things. They're grilling. They're doing all kinds of activities. Thank you so much, Old Dog, for that generous contribution. That was very nice of you. Thank you so much. It makes my 4th of July that much better. Chat room's pretty full, so I think people are nursing the sunburn. and maybe relaxing a little bit because tomorrow is we're off. You call it a holiday, I call it a day without pay. They're forcing me to stay home because the plant is closed. But Brooks, no, he don't make any money. So that's just the way it goes. So I don't even know if I want to really bring this subject up, but I have to. I get accused from time to time by people who don't understand me. Because this is where we treat, cure, and prevent the disease of ignorance. And they say that I'm political, but they don't really realize that I'm not political at all. I'm not a political animal. I don't do politics. I've never run for political office. I talk about government. I talk about government because it's important. Because, if you want to be an American and you don't want to talk about government, I don't think you've really captured the spirit of what it means to be an American. There was a day, and it wasn't that long ago, maybe 25 years at the most. There was a day when you could go down on the town square, or you could go down to the city park, or you could go down to the beach with a microphone or nothing, just a pad of paper and a pencil, and you could ask people questions about our country, and they would know the answers. They would know some, if not all, of the Bill of Rights. They would know what Independence Day means. They would know what Memorial Day means. They would know who it was we fought in order to gain our independence. But not so today. Today, all of those governmental things, all the things that have to do with our heritage, that have to do with why Americans are so particularly stubborn. We don't like to be told what to do. We founded this nation on not doing what we're told to do. We are obstinate. We are proud. And we are driven. We are driven. And when you move here from South Africa or from South America or from Europe, what happens in a very short amount of time is you catch that too. You catch that, hey, wait a minute, I built this. This is mine. And I have more and to spare. I don't need all of this. So I can either give it away, which many Americans do, or I can sell it for a profit and I can make a living doing it. And that doesn't exist anywhere else in the world. Anywhere else in the world, it is based upon larceny. It's based upon force. It's based upon a concept which we talk about all the time, but we don't really understand. And that concept is democracy. Yeah, it's based upon democracy, which basically says there are more of us than there are of you, and therefore what we say goes. All this stuff that you say you have is now ours because we're taking it. You see, it's based on a system of larceny and force. That's democracy. And no nation ever, even back in Greek and Roman times, they conquered lots and lots of nations. Some of them were democracies. Democracies don't survive. Democracies don't survive because what happens eventually, the mob realizes that they can vote for themselves a piece of the public coffer. And when they do, it destroys the nation. Democracies don't live. We, the United States of America, is not a democracy. North Carolina, Texas, Oklahoma, for God's sake, California, you are not democracies. You are republics. And the document that we celebrate today, hang on a second, let me send TFR to their break. Okay, TFR is on their break now. We'll bring them back after 3 minutes. The document that we celebrate today, the Declaration of Independence, establishes those basic Bill of Rights. And then, it's only been amended 17 times since then in 245 years. 17 times. And really 2 of those amendments don't really count because prohibition and then not prohibition, come on, that doesn't even count. So 15 significant edits in 245 years is nothing. Nothing. We make more edits to company policy in a year, let alone 245 years. It was an inspired document. And that document has a clause in it that guarantees every state in this country a Republican form of government. Now, it doesn't mean that they have to join the Republican Party. Get serious. It means that they, as a state, will elect representatives. And those representatives will then go to a place where all of the state's representatives gather and they turn in their votes. And the way it works in a republic is not a democracy. Let's think of it this way. I can't remember which World Series game it was, but there was a World Series game in which the Pittsburgh Pirates and the New York Yankees were playing. I know there were several of them. But in this particular game, the New York Yankees were really swinging the bat. In some games, they scored like 14 runs or 11 runs, some ungodly amount of runs, which did win the game. But the Pirates came back, and even though they didn't score as high, they won like 4-3 or 5-2, you see. So if you were to take this 7-game World Series and say, okay, we're going to total up all the runs, and that's who's going to be the winner of the World Series. Well, New York Yankees would have won hands down. They had like 41 runs for the series. But that's not what happened, because the World Series doesn't work that way. It works by games. And what happened was the Pittsburgh Pirates, even though they scored less runs, they won 4 games. And they won the World Series. That's what a republic is, okay? Each state is like a game. And when that state has its vote, the winner gets all the electors for that state. Arizona, Georgia, and its 15 electors, whoever wins that state gets the 15 electors. And those 15 electors go to that room, a joint session of Congress, and they total them up. And what happens is the winner of at least 270, because we have 535 senators and congressmen totaled up together, and 270 is just a little bit over half of that, be 540 instead of 535. And that's what you need to win. That's what you need to win. And in the rare case, and it has never happened before, I don't think so, in the rare case that, no, it has happened before, but it was for another reason. It wasn't for the reasons that we were be battling it now. If for some reason that doesn't happen, you don't get to 270. Neither candidate gets to 270. Let's say there's 3 candidates, and they battle it out where the third candidate takes people away from the list. And so what happens is nobody gets to 270. Then Congress will elect the president, and the Senate will elect the vice president. And that's the way it works. All right, let's see here. We're going to call them back. This is the way. Skype. Forget about the technical issues. Okay. Might be a little bit of intro music here, but we'll be doing well with it. No? Yes? Okay. They're connected, but no intro music, which means we cut it just right. And thank you so much, Jen, for being out there in California listening. She's texting me right now. And Nina is down in Florida, and she's getting ready to go line dancing. Yesterday, she went to the Trump rally. 5. That makes 5 Trump rallies for her. And she sent us all kinds of great pictures from it, mostly featuring her, but it was just great just to hear and feel the energy of patriots getting together, and the crowds are enormous. 35,000 people, 2 million people watching online. Holy cow. So that's the way a republic works. So it's tenuous. It's tenuous right now because, the global syndicate, and I've talked about it from time to time. If you're new to this program, just humor me and give me a little second to explain it. The global syndicate is a force of leaders who have been on this planet for a long, long time, thousands of years. And they're so secretive and they're so powerful that they almost cannot be defeated. They have been defeated a few times, but they never surrender. They always, regroup and refortify and rearm and they have so much money they can do what they want to do. But here are the four. The first, let's call it the bankers, the financial arm, the World Economic Forum, the International Monetary Fund, the World Bank. This makes up the core group, the Davos crowd, the people who own the system of exchange. They own all the money. They manage all the money. That's what causes most of the conflict right there, because 90% of the world's wealth, or at least the system of exchange of wealth, either goes through their hands or is owned by them. And it's a big deal because they want the world to be a certain way, and they say we have the money to keep it that way, and by God, we're going to do it. The second is, I'm going to talk about the last one, the first one last. The second one is the military. Now, for thousands of years, history is written, of course, by the victors, but for thousands of years, Earth was ruled basically by one guy at a time. Okay, it was a king, it was an emperor, it was a pope, one guy and his wooden ships and his cannons and his bayonets and his germ warfare ruled the world. And no one could stand up to them because they had the steel, they had the weapons, they had the technology. And oh my gosh, if you even looked like you were going to try to put up a fight, they would come after you and smash you and just behead all of you. The military arm. The third one is the political arm. Now this one's crafty. This one is more. If you watch the series Peaky Blinders, remember the series Peaky Blinders? This was an English gangster family post World War I, and they had paid their dues. They'd fought in the war, and Churchill liked them, and they liked Churchill. But the politics was the most evil you ever saw. It was so real. It was so. It really scared them. It scared the gangsters how evil these politicians were. Well, for all intents and purposes, the political arm of the global syndicate in the United States rests with one party. No. It's not Democrat and Republican. No. It's the establishment party. The establishment. And I know you don't see them on the ballot. You don't. And if you listen to this program, maybe when it comes time to election time, we can alert you as to which one is the establishment candidate, because it does not matter if they have an R or a D or an I or an L next to their name. They can all be part of the establishment party. You call them rhinos, Republican in name only. But not really. They're Republicans. They sit on the Republican side. They shake Republican hands. They sleep with Republican wives. They're Republicans, okay? But they're also establishment, which means the regular order. It's what Mitch McConnell calls the regular order. Let's get back to the regular order. That's the establishment. The Paul Ryan was an establishment Republican. Oh, he could talk. He could say the stuff. He could recite. He could read. He could look with those blue eyes straight into the camera and lie. And the crazy thing is, you would believe it. You would believe it. You'd have faith in it that it would be a lie. And of course, I mean, Nancy Pelosi, you get that all the way, and Schiff and Schumer and all those guys, of course. But it's the guys that appear one way and then do something else. You know, the Manchins of the world. And you know, it used to be Ted Cruz was even that way, but he's such a great statesman. But he is a politician. Wow, such a politician. I don't know. I've been to a lot of his events. I've met him in person. And I can tell you there's no finer human being at making a speech, at making a point, at drilling into the truth. But as far as a manager, as far as a governor, as a senator doing his job representing the state of Texas, he does a good job. But if it ever got into his hands where he was the governor, he was the president, he was managing some agency, it'd be establishment. That's just the way it is. It's politics. It's Rubio. It's Rubio with a little bit better voice. I don't know how to put it. The fourth, and this is the biggest, the most powerful these days, they weren't always this way, but they've become this way because, you know, one time there were about 75 of these magnates. There were 75 newspaper owners and radio station owners and TV studio owners and movie makers and movie studio conglomerates. There were about 75, and the competition was fierce, and the markets would, you know, Chicago market was different than a New York market was different than a Miami market and an LA market, right? Well, it's not that way anymore. Now there's just 6 white guys, 6 rich white guys that control all of that. And since the year 2012, it's not long, 9 years, but it's grown like you cannot believe. In 9 years, Silicon Valley has grown 3 more tech giants to add to the 9. So you have the 9, the Nazgul, let's call them, of broadcasting, and you have the 3. The 3 are not going to last. They're not going to last. They don't have the vision. They're Johnny-come-lately. They have not built a legacy. A legacy is where you have 2, 3, 4 generations of skill and custom and protocol that's handed down. The 3 don't have that. They're all new at it. Okay? Zuckerberg is a newbie. Jack, a newbie. Even Gates, you know, started in his garage. Yeah, he's kind of a newbie, Microsoft. Google, same thing. Google, YouTube, and all the other companies that they've bought. They're one generation, but they're very powerful, and they make up an arm of the global syndicate called the global media empire. Now, this is what makes it difficult, because you have to tune into America Free Radio in order to get the truth. And the truth will always set you free. And once you're free, it's a little scary, because you realize you're not being fed a fairy tale, a Truman Show world anymore. You're not in the Matrix. You don't have this assurance from the news actors that you're doing exactly what you're supposed to be doing. You don't have the backup from the slave score. The slave score is your credit score, that FICO score, right? That is a score that tells you how good of a slave you are in the economic world that the bankers have set up. If you go to college and earn a degree and pay your own way, and you graduate, and yeah, you got to borrow money to buy a house, you got to borrow money to have a car and put your kids through school and blah, blah, blah. But if you work really hard and you stay reasonably between the lines, eventually you're going to pay all that off. Your kids are going to grow up and they're going to get houses of their own. Your cars are all going to be owned. You're going to pay off your house, 1 or 2 of them even. And then you're going to be living within your means. And when you live within your means, you don't need a credit card. You don't have to go down to the bank and borrow the money to take a family vacation. You just take it. The point I'm trying to make here is you become an enemy of the state when that happens. When you become debt-free, You're no longer making payments on anything. You're no longer showing the state that you're willing to live beyond your means in order to sustain the state. You become an enemy of the state, and your FICO score drops to the 400s or the 500s. Mine didn't even resolve for 10 years. If you put my Social Security number in, no credit score came back. It wouldn't resolve because I had paid everything off. I was living within my means for a long time, and I swore I would never go in debt again. I broke that oath because I bought a truck. I paid it off 2 years later. I just bought a motorcycle. I'm going to have it paid off by Christmas. So, yeah, I mean, I want it now. I don't have all the money now, but I will have it in a few months. So, yeah, I'm using it. And so my credit score has gone back up a little bit. But my slave score is going to go right back down to where it was. Do I care? No. Why? Because my life doesn't depend upon whether I have approval of the government. I don't care if the global syndicate thinks I'm a significant human being or not. Yeah, I've been kicked off YouTube a few times and Facebook a few times and Twitter a few times. So what? I'm free and I'm sovereign. And you know what? There's a new word out I'm kind of liking. I think you like it too. It's extreme. It's extreme. People say, yeah, okay, taking a vacation. Okay, be safe. No. Change that. I used to say, be free. They kind of go, huh? No, they'll get this. Be extreme. Be extreme. Be the extreme version of you. Forget about lukewarm. Forget about punctuating your life with paychecks or punctuating your life with family vacations or, God, punctuating your life with retirement. Oh, yeah, I got plans. When I retire, I'm going to just fill in the blank. You know, the government has thought that way for a long time. I'll share something with you. When the military began to be volunteer, they decided to entice people to become part of the military by giving them incentives if they would stay, if they would re-enlist. And so what they would do, whether you were an NCO or a commissioned officer, is if you stayed for 20 years, they would give you a pension, which is 50% of your base pay forever, for the rest of your life. And if you stayed 30 years, which they kind of thought, you know, these people with 20 years experience, they're about the most skilled we have. They know every rule. They know every piece of machinery. They know how we work. If we could keep them for another 10 years, let them become a master chief, and let's give them 75% of their base pay for the rest of their lives. Well, think about that, 30 years. That's a long time, isn't it? But when did you go into basic training? Yeah, 18. You were 18 years old. You didn't have a job. I mean, you did, but you don't want to go to work at the gas station. You don't want to go to work at the burger joint. You wanted to go to college. You wanted to see the world. There was always the chance you might get shot at, but, you know, in peacetime, it's not really like that, right? You can fly airplanes. You can take care of helicopters. You know, be all you can be, blah, blah, blah. The point is, after 30 years, you're only 48 years old. 48 is a spring chicken these days. You know, 48-year-old women, they are so hot, you can't believe it. It's not like 48 when my mom was 48. When my mom was 48, she was old. My grandparents were old. Everybody was old. 48 is nothing now. But here was their thinking. This guy will give us 30 years. He will get out at 48. We will pay him 75% of his base pay. And guess what the statistics showed? Yeah, they lived an average of 7 years. They were dead by 55. Why? How could that be? Because for 30 years they had done nothing. They just didn't exist. They just wore a uniform. They just blended in. They just went along to get along. And at the end of that 48, or that when they reach 48, at the end of 30 years, they decided, okay, now I can start living. Now I can start doing what I always wanted to do, and I got that 75% of base pay to back me up, fill in the gaps, keep the wolf away from the door. Killed them because they weren't ready for it. It drove them into depression. It made their hearts fail. They died. Now, that's not the case today because we have reviewed the way that we've looked at life since the 40s, and we've made changes. The fastest growing age group in the United States of America today is the over 100. Over 100. Do you know there are more people in Florida over the age of 100 than there are people 5 years old? Yeah, that's a hell of a statistic, isn't it? Here's the deal. Government is trying to use, as part of the global media empire, or part of the global syndicate, is using the global media empire to pull you away from what it is you want to be. They want you to be what they want you to be. And anything outside of that is considered extreme. You're an extremist. You're an antisocial, right-wing zealot. You can't be trusted. You have to be censored. Because what if, God forbid, you spoke to your neighbor? What if you got on some social media and convinced somebody else, hey, yeah, I should be doing that right now? Well, we can't allow that. We just got done training your kids. We have them convinced that gender is fluid, that it could be anything you want it to be. We've got them convinced that marriage is an old idea. You don't have to do that anymore. We've got them convinced that kids should belong to the state. I mean, yeah, you have them and you're changing their diapers and everything, but once they, can figure out how to wipe their own butt, they become wards of the state. The state trains them. The state employs them. They're not your kids anymore. You didn't make that. This is where it's going. And you have to wonder why. Why are we here? ID21, Independence Day 21. Here we are. We're supposed to be in a different place than we are right now. Something happened. We got sidetracked. Timeline shifted. And now we're talking about something we haven't talked about in 50 years. In this country, anyway. We talk about it in other countries. We've certainly asserted our military power all over the world to try to keep people safe or try to beat back one despot after another. Who knows? But not here. We don't have tanks and ranks in this country. We don't see military airplanes that we have to duck behind a tree or dive into a shelter somewhere. We don't have that here. There's no concept of that. So, China today, actually yesterday, they publicly demanded that the U.S. sever its military ties with Taiwan, or it may lead to war. Now, we have not said that word seriously. We've talked about Cold Wars. We've talked about old wars. This is a new war. So, Wednesday of this week, Ren Guojiang, a spokesman for China's defense ministry, scary looking dude, let me tell you, he issued a warning to Washington, which would be Virtual Joe and his gang of criminals. You don't make a warning to a city. You're making a warning to the Washington class, okay? Over its increasing military contacts with Taiwan. We've sent them weapons. We've sent them intel. We give them satellite support. Mr. Ren said that China firmly believes in reunifying with the island nation and is opposed to any foreign intervention, a la Hong Kong, right? Hong Kong was a Western city with Western banks and Western universities and Western ideas and Western freedom. And people in Hong Kong could travel freely to New York, and people in New York could travel freely to Hong Kong. And it was a great relationship. But now China's reunifying. China's pulling back in all of those very valuable assets. So in his statement, he demanded the U.S. sever all military ties with Taiwan. He said the complete reunification of China is a historical necessity, and the great rejuvenation of the Chinese nation is an unstoppable trend. In other words, they're out of money. They're out of money. You remember when the Great Depression happened? Well, maybe not. Maybe you weren't there. I wasn't there, but I read about it a lot. The debt ratio, the amount of debt that we carried compared to our gross domestic product, that's all the things that we make here in this country. When we got close to 1929, that ratio got up to 10. And that's when it kind of triggered, when they collapsed the money supply and they smashed the middle class out of existence. Right now in China, their debt to GDP ratio is over 100. Yeah, they're more in debt than all the money they make in their country. Of course, people can't complain, because if they do, well, it's off to the organ farm for you. But they got to make up the difference. They got to make up the difference. In this country, we would do it with either cutting back programs, cutting regulations, or raising taxes, which they like to do. You can't do that in China because they already own everything. All the billionaires, they just think they're billionaires. These cities, they're worth trillions of dollars. Taiwan's worth trillions. Hong Kong, trillions. And China just took them. The CCP just took them. They didn't pay anything for it. They just took it. So the common aspirations of the people are peace and stability across the Taiwan Strait. Taiwan independence is a dead-end road, and seeking it means war. Mr. Ren also demanded Washington abide by its One China policy and the joint communiques. The warning follows the largest recorded aerial incursion into Taiwan's airspace on June 15th. You remember that? 28 warplanes flew over the strait. The sovereign nation's air defense identification zone, and Taiwan reported the aircraft included fighters and nuclear-capable bombers. They're not going to nuke Taiwan, okay? Don't worry about that. Defending the recent incursion, Mr. Ren described the aerial maneuver as a necessary action. A necessary action. Necessary. It was necessary to maintain and safeguard national sovereignty. Not Taiwan's, China's. So, although Washington does not have formal ties with Taipei, that's in Taiwan, it remains the island's largest arms supplier. We sell them missiles and rockets and grenades, right? However, the U.S. relationship with the island has slowly been growing under Trump, and not so much under Virtual Joe and his gang of criminals. On Thursday, Taiwan's foreign minister, whose name is Joseph Wu, like the Wu assassins, said the country needs to prepare for a possible Chinese invasion. Now, see, that's a new word, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that, because this is not a word that China likes to use. They don't use it. I'm going to share with you what they think. Now, he said, as Taiwan decision makers, we cannot take any chances. We have to be prepared. When the Chinese government is saying that they would not renounce the use of force and they conduct military exercises around Taiwan, we would rather believe that it is real. Very smart boy. Over recent months, China has increased both political and military pressure against the island nation which it believes to be a breakaway province. I think we're going to get some break music here with TFR, and we will send them. Okay, they're on break now. Mr. Ren added that Taipei's ruling party must be soberly aware that the future of Taiwan lies in national reunification.
Number one source for news and information without the hate, hype, and fear. We're proud to feature.
The plan to defeat Taiwan is well known by everyone because China has let it be known. That's why it's well known, because they want it to be known. And that being said, you can bank that this is not how it's going to happen. This is classic misinformation. Here is what they said they're going to do. Number one, we're going to knock out all their early warning radar and communication. Yeah, makes sense. Number two, we're going to hit key infrastructure with cruise missiles, lots of cruise missiles. And number three, we're going to use our ships to bombard any response against the Chinese siege, because that's what this is. It's a siege. They're going to sit offshore and they're going to pound the stuffing out of Taiwan until they say enough. Well, what's missing from this picture? Well, how about the truth? How about the truth? Because that's what's missing here. The first wave will almost absolutely be not to wipe out their radar and their infrastructure. That would be like a big mistake. The first wave is going to be cyber warfare. No doubt about it. No doubt about it. They've been testing the fences for a while. They will scramble Taiwanese networks of everything from electricity to radio to the movement of money to vehicle traffic. Okay? The nation will be brought to an absolute standstill within minutes, and they will be unable to tell the U.S. anything is happening. They're going to go dark without firing a shot. The next thing that will undoubtedly happen is that the Chinese will offer Taiwan an ultimatum: surrender or die. And there is one thing that will complicate this effort severely, and that is the presence of foreigners, the presence of Americans in Taiwan. I'm not talking tourists here. There are foreigners from the USA, from Britain, from other free nations, and they're there by the hundreds of thousands. And they're not tourists. They live there. They work there. Taiwan is a massive manufacturer of everything from clothing to weapons to high technology electronics. All there. And they're nobody's slouch. Nobody's slouch at all. In a second, we'll call TFR back. I'll continue now with this Taiwanese assault. By the way, you can hear fireworks outside because it's ID4, it's ID21, it's ID21. There's also a high level of American military personnel there. Why? Because while China lets the world know they are watching Taiwan very closely, America is watching China even more closely. And right from across the Taiwan Strait, American hardware is lurking under that sea as well. The Chinese suspect, but they don't know. When their ships begins sinking within seconds after the first shots are fired, their public plan of defeating Taiwan will fall apart like everything else made in China. And that leaves only one tactic remaining. And this is what the Taiwanese defense minister was saying, and that is invasion. There's just one problem with that. China's never won a war outside its own borders, ever. In thousands of years, it has never happened. Why? Because this is what happens when you demand military service. The Chinese people hate the CCP, and given half a chance, they will defect. Given slightly more of a chance, they will revolt against the CCP. They know Taiwan is free, and they are not. That makes all the difference. And by the way, Taiwan is no slouch. As I said, they have high-tech jamming, anti-ship technology that will drop the Chinese Navy to the bottom of the sea within minutes of making an aggressive move toward the Taiwanese people. Do you think the Taiwanese are afraid of cruise missiles? No. You know why? Because they can hack those cruise missiles and turn them right back around and send them right back at Chinese targets. They're the tech leaders in the world. This war will be short, and China will lose. And they know it. That's why this war is all about rhetoric. It's all about rhetoric. It's all about positioning. It's all about being cold and not being hot. Because as soon as they go hot, China loses. Because the CCP has one thing that they cannot control. 1.4 billion Chinese. Not going to happen. Even in our own country, we couldn't control 225 million Americans, we were smaller back then, who didn't like the Vietnam War. We couldn't fight the Vietnam War anymore, even though ostensibly we were very close to winning it, because the American people wouldn't support it anymore. China will not be able to win a war with anybody because the Chinese people are not going to support it. All right. Let's talk a little bit about the new culture. ID21, Independence Day 21. Once upon a time in America, journalists would write holiday pieces. And they would write them basically out of desperation because journalists, by and large, want to write what they want to write. Or they want to write what's going to get them promoted. But they don't want to write, go down and do a story on, the Elks Lodge and their cookout. Go down and do a story about, the parade, downtown. Interview some people. They don't like doing it. In a world where amusement parks and beaches beckon, where businesses carpet-bombed consumers with holiday sales ads coming into our phones, they might as well drop ticker tape from the sky, recreation, crass commercialism overmatched the remembrance of important historical persons like Jesus Christ, a la Santa Claus, and maybe even the resurrection with the Easter Bunny, and it just goes on and on and on, right? The holiday pieces were rear guard actions. They were waged to recall Americans to the reason for the season. Now, these holiday defenders are even more badly outnumbered. And let's just call them the Syndicate. The Syndicate culture warriors have supplanted commercials as the chief enemy of public memory. They don't aim to hijack commemoration days to serve their commercial ends. They aim to erase the meaning of these holidays altogether. Consider the efforts of the Randolph School Board in New Jersey. You've seen them in the news. Let me give you a little bit different perspective. They wanted to remove Columbus Day. Columbus Day, it's in October. They wanted to remove Columbus Day from the school calendar, and they wanted to rename the holiday to Indigenous People Day. And they don't really think these things through, because yes, Columbus, opened the highway for Europeans and others to come to the United States and homestead and expand across the United States. Ostensibly, they displaced Indian or Native American tribes who were living here. What these activists failed to consider is the fact that the indigenous peoples that were here when Columbus got here were not the indigenous peoples when they got here. They displaced the people that lived here before them. Oh, they wiped them out down to the last child, killed them all, left no trace of them whatsoever. Some traces were found here and there, like in the Grand Canyon and other places like that, where they couldn't get there and destroy everything. But, indigenous people doesn't mean the last person alive in that place before you got there. Anyway, the parents pushed back. The board, acting out of spite, voted to get rid of all holiday names, just calling them days off. And that triggered national attention and even greater pushback. After a lengthy meeting with angry parents, the board abandoned the whole renaming exercise, and the syndicate lost that skirmish. But I can tell you, I wrote a book about it. Charm a favor. You need to get it and read it. Because the syndicate does not quit. They don't give up. They never surrender. They may walk away, but they'll be back to fight another day with more money, better-looking news actors, and another slick narrative. Even a few years ago, these antics would have been completely unthinkable. Unthinkable. It would have been like, showing up at church saying that Jesus didn't exist, or showing up at the New Year's Day parade saying that you shouldn't be celebrating this, or showing up at the Independence Day fireworks show and tossing water on all of them. You shouldn't be shooting these things off celebrating warfare. You see, but not anymore. This fight has become America's new battleground. It's become the new, I was going to say endless war, but that's not really true, because we don't really have war. We have battles. We battle. We continuously battle, and we never claim victory. These school boards, by the way, they're elected by their neighbors, and then they turn on their neighbors. Now, admittedly, the neighbors kind of get what they ask for, because it's sort of like having a line of 100 volunteers, right? 100 people standing shoulder to shoulder to shoulder, against their toes up to the line. And then somebody says, who wants to be on the school board? Take a step forward. And what happens is everyone in the line takes a step backwards, except for 2 or 3, 4, 5 people. They don't get it. They're not going to step forward, but the rest of the line steps back, which leaves them in the front, and they get picked. That's how school boards are chosen. Nobody wants to be on the school board. It doesn't pay anything. It's a terrible position. It puts you in a terrible political position, because if you go with the syndicate, you're hated by your neighbors. And if you don't go with the syndicate, your political career is over, you see. The school boards are, in fact, just the point of the spear in the culture wars. And they're targeted by both sides as a choice objective for reshaping America's civil space. Civics has been a prime target in these campaigns, reshaping the American political identity as a precursor to reshaping American politics. And that's what the syndicate's been doing to your kids for 2 generations. That's why when you try to explain to them something about the Constitution, something about the president, something about, how you feel about a senator or a governor or a secretary of state, your kids don't understand. Your kids will argue with you till they're blue in the face. It's because they learned something else. They learned way different than you did. One of the most prominent controversies in the culture wars these days swirls around curriculum that would implement concepts introduced by what's called critical racist theory. It was written by the founders of what's known as the 1619 Project, which was a gigantic money laundering operation, and what they call anti-racist doctrine, which is nothing more than racist doctrine. Now, these beliefs insist that our nation's civic structures are inherently oppressive, biased, and racist. Historical persons and events become fodder for this fight because historical memories are the billboards of these racist structures. They must be torn down, and that is why the Randolph School Board went after Columbus. So I'm not going to go into what critical racist theory is, but suffice it to say, it is it is taught in almost every academic level and even corporate levels as a method to allow government and the establishment, and by that I mean the corporate mores, to divide people up based upon their race. And that just cannot stand. We are not a nation of races. We are a nation of people. We are all Americans. There are no black Americans. There are no white Americans. There are no red Americans or yellow Americans. We are Americans. And the critical racist theory is founded upon the idea that if you're not white, you are automatically disadvantaged. And if you are white, you are automatically advantaged. This is dividing people up based upon the color of their skin. That just cannot happen in America. It's not going to happen, but it is happening, isn't it? Independence Day should be marked to affirm the importance of political freedoms and recognize the importance of fighting to secure and protect them. That's what it's here for. Freedom isn't free. Freedom is not free. Somebody fought so that you have the right to protest or to join. Generations, not one or two, generations of Americans of all races fought and died so generations of Americans could argue over how to teach civics. But you can't make a mistake here. When you make a mistake here, you lose everything. There is no honor in what the would-be reinterpreters of America's holidays have in store for America. Their agenda, it ain't about education. It is about indoctrination. Indoctrination that would overturn how America is governed. Critical racist theory, as civics education offers, perhaps the darkest example of a radical political agenda hiding under the guise of an objective inquiry in search of a just society. This method of query is rooted in Marxist ideology way before the end of the 19th century, whose primary purpose was never truth-seeking, ever. Its primary purpose was creating critical instruments to undermine political legitimacy and justify new political orders that are both harshly repressive and demonstrably unjust. If critical racist theory were implemented in practice and not just a theoretical discussion, this doctrine would violate all of the civil rights, all of the civil rights laws, all of the civil rights traditions that we've had in this country for hundreds of years that secure equal protection under the law and outlaw discrimination. It would codify discrimination. It would require by law, by structure, discrimination. Americans have labored for over 200 years to fulfill the promise of the American Revolution, and that is this: strive to create a just society where the people are sovereign and there's equal opportunity for all. And I will tell you right now, I've said it before on this program. I sent it out on Facebook and Twitter again today. War is nothing but justice denied. Because if there was justice, people wouldn't go to war. People wouldn't fight. They could settle their grievances with justice. Now, the ultimate heresy would be to substitute a new meaning of July 4th, Independence Day, based upon a power-hungry, radical political agenda, like critical racist theory. We can't let it happen. We're not going to let it happen. If we have to go to the mat with every single school board in this country, that is what is going to happen. I agree with you, friendly. There is no such thing as equality. Wherever there are two intelligences in the universe, one will always be greater than the other, Jesus Christ being greater than them all. There is no such thing as equality. Once the pair of consciousness addresses, the souls are created, they immediately begin to diverge. One learns faster than the other, learns different than another, takes less repetitions than the other, and they change. And that's the beauty of it. We are all sovereign intelligences in the universe. If there were 1,000 people in an auditorium, there would be 1,000 different individuals. And individuals are not equal. And you know what? That isn't the point. That wasn't the design of government. That wasn't the design of the Constitution. It cannot be. In fact, I would argue that equality would be the same thing as oppression. Forcing all those people to wear the same clothes, to weigh the same weight, to recite the same answer to the same questions would be oppression. That is not what we're talking about here. When we talk about equality, we mean equal opportunity. We mean where any two people are given an opportunity, they both can succeed. There is no zero sum. There is no one must lose in order for the other one to win. They both can win. That is the equality that's guaranteed by the government. Now, does that mean that some people have to work harder than others to make it? Well, obviously that's true. Some people have parents that have saved up money for them and put them to college. They didn't have to borrow money to go to school, so they didn't graduate with $200,000 in debt. They are taller, and so they can dunk a basketball, and life is easier for them, and they can leave the hood. I mean, there are all kinds of things that give people particular advantages over other people. They run faster, they remember better, they see better, they think better. That's what makes us individual and sovereign. So when we're talking about equality, we're talking about equality of opportunity. Now, admittedly, this kind of equality doesn't exist, doesn't really last long, even if it does exist, if there's no equal justice. If two people can commit the same crime, and one goes to prison and the other one is live on TV at 7 o'clock, you see something's wrong. When we have 30, 300, 3,000 individuals who can murder and destroy evidence and tamper with witnesses and lie and steal and walk free and nothing happens to them, it erodes that equality worse than anything, because we lose our faith in the rule of law. We lose our faith in the very structure that makes it possible for another person to succeed, because it tilts the system. It's a cheat. It's a cheat. When you see Clinton or Obama or Yates or Power or Brennan or Clapper walk free, and they're worth millions of dollars, they would never go a minute in their life hungry, ever, or their kids or their grandkids. And yet they've killed people. They've murdered people, innocent people. They've stolen hundreds of millions of dollars, laundered taxpayer money into their own back pockets. All of that's illegal. But justice does not prevail with them because there is no equal justice under the law. And that's what robs equality. So when you talk about equality, we're talking about equality where it counts. Equal justice under the law, equal opportunity for everyone. And it has nothing, absolutely nothing to do with the color of your skin. And don't tell me that it does. All right, we got about 6 minutes in this segment. I bring this up from time to time. We've talked about it before. I'm not 100% sure how to protect your stuff from an EMP. I mean, you could buy stuff, but how are you going to test it, right? I mean, if it doesn't work, that company's not going to be around for you to sue anyway. But here's what I recommend. I think you need to have some basic gear. I would recommend buying a CB radio. They're cheap, $100, less sometimes. Buy a CB antenna and buy the cable that goes with it. It runs on a car battery. Okay? Runs on, and you can get a couple of converters if you need to, so you can plug it into the wall and run it. But I don't want you to hook it up. I just want you to buy it. Just buy it, keep it in the box, buy the antenna, keep it in the bag, buy the cable, leave it in the sack, and pack it away. You can wrap it in foil if you want. It won't do any good. The point is it's not plugged into anything. It's not grounded to anything. Just buy it. It's cheap, and it's the Citizens Band radio. Now, it only goes a few miles, but that's all you really need to communicate anyway. Then the other thing you need to do is to get a regular radio that picks up on the AM, FM, and the ham band. You can find these. They're pretty cheap. Now, you'll only be able to listen, but there will be some kind of broadcast going on after an EMP. So just to have those things is going to keep you from being totally in the dark. And there are other things, a water filter, food storage, those kinds of things. I'm not going to talk about that today. What I am going to talk about is I'm going to ask the question, why is it that America isn't really seriously preparing for an EMP like other nations are? I guarantee you Taiwan's prepared. And you're familiar with the 2009 EMP Commission report, right? I think I put the link in here. Yes, I'm going to leave it in my notes, which you can access very easily by going to americafreeradio.com, click on the program notes, select 2021, select July 4th, and boom, you'll be able to get these notes. Free. I just give them to you. But the 2009 EMP Commission report raised the issue of electromagnetic pulse preparedness for the American public. Forget about the government, the military. They're going to do what they're going to do, and you're not going to know about it and probably can't even fathom the efforts that they're making. I'm talking about you. I'm talking about you, the American public. Now, it's notorious stating that just 1 year after an EMP attack, 90% of the American population would be dead. I don't really go along with that. I think it's more in the range of 30%, and I'll tell you why in a second. When the report came out, and it said that 90% of the American population would be dead, it really sent a shockwave through the country. And for, I think, this claim alone, the report was discredited. But think about it. You know, there are a lot of people in our country, 6% roughly, what's 6% of 330 million people? It's a substantial number of people, but it isn't 90%. Those 6% have to have access to electronics and equipment to stay alive. They need dialysis. They need oxygen. They need a heart transplant. They need a liver implant. They need bone marrow transfers. They're undergoing cancer treatment. And without those treatments, without those pieces of equipment, Hang on a second. Okay. We've put TFR on break. Without that, they'll die. I mean, a person on dialysis will die of toxemia within 30 days if they don't get their blood cleaned artificially. And people with diabetes, obviously, if you don't have the juice, you're out, right? An EMP would probably take out the suppliers for the juice, for the insulin. And depending on whether you inject or what types you inject, that stuff can be expensive, $40, $50, $300 a vial. And some people go 2 of them a month. Without insurance, that's a rough road. It shouldn't be that expensive, but it is. The point is that these people that live a quasi-normal life would not be able to live a normal life without that kind of support. Only those people who are healthy without drugs would be able to survive. Now, obviously, if you need drugs like a blood pressure medicine, you're taking something to keep your brain from exploding. Get a 3-month supply. You could go to Walmart or go to CVS. They'll sell you a 3-month supply, no problem, hands down. But you could ask your doctor, and they could call the pharmacy, and you could get a 6-month supply. Yeah, 6-month supply on hand. Now, that's how you kind of take care of yourself in this kind of case. Anyway, books began to be written on the subject. Ted Koppel's Lights Out, Fortune's 1 Second After. You remember that? 1 Second After, that was an excellent, excellent book. Crawford's Lights Out quickly reached blockbuster levels. And, these books did have good stuff in them because they did make people aware of electromagnetic warfare and what that means for Americans, even if you don't see the flash, even if you're nowhere close to the flash. Our grid is so interconnected that once heavy pieces of infrastructure, big transformers, big switchgear, is ruined with an EMP, which dumps millions, tens of millions of volts close to the blast, millions of volts into the air that's looking for a place to go. It's looking for a ground. And when it finds it, it's going to burn up everything between it and the ground. And that's what makes electronics go dark. And these have happened before from the sun, but we weren't living in an electronic society then. So to truly understand how very real this risk is, we didn't even discover it until after World War II. I believe all we have to do is look at the battle plans of some of the nations that hate America the most, right? You could start with Russia. I don't know if Russia truly hates America. They kind of fear America, I suppose. Maybe the world would be a better place without America on it. I don't know. As far as Russia's concerned, they don't have aspirations to invade or, take up all the property of America, whereas China does. But the non-contact warfare was the name of Russian General Vladimir Slipchenko's military textbook. And with this text, he explains how EMPs are the greatest revolution in military affairs. Let's see here. I think this will unmute. Oh. Now I don't know how to unmute them. I sent them to break and now I can't unmute them. Let's see what happens if I click this. No, that's not going to do it either. Skype, you have messed up. You've messed up so many hosts that use this program. And it's really rough on us. We really want a way. We need a command board so that we can mute callers and bring them back in. Okay. Nope, that removed the wrong one. I have to call everybody back again. All right, here we go. Hang on just one moment. Yeah, I don't want to have to do this every 30 minutes. This is really a El Pano in the butt-o. Okay, TFR is back. Let me go ahead and bring the call board back, just in case, one of you decide to call in. I'm live every Sunday, unless I'm traveling. Okay, we're all back up. Everything's good now. Call board is live. TFR is live. And we're good. So the EMP, this electromagnetic pulse, in its ability to knock the lights out for 500, 600 miles in every direction. This is a great tool. Of course, the issue always is deployment. You see, if you can't get your missile defense systems online, if your tanks don't run, if your planes have all just fallen out of the sky, you're kind of screwed, right? I mean, all your passenger planes are going to crash that are in the air at the time this pulse goes off. The flagship journal of the Russian General Staff, Military Thought, further echoes this concept, an article within the journal titled Weak Points of the U.S. Concept of Network-Centric Warfare. It points out the use of an EMP as a possible means of defeating the U.S. It won't do it by itself, but if you could poke our eyes out and make us sit on the floor with our head covered for 30 minutes, you could end us. Now, aside from the concern that comes from foreign military journals specifically hatching battle plans against your country, Russia now possesses what is known as super EMPs. This is a weapon of drastically increased pulse amplitude, capable of disabling not just stuff here on Earth, also spacecraft, radar sites, ICBMs, energy supply systems, military command systems, and economies. You think knocking down the Trade Center hurt our economy? Yeah, it did for a while. It took a while for us to get back up and going again. Well, this is like knocking down all of the trade centers in all of the cities all at once. And what about China? Things are no different there. EMP capabilities, theory, defenses seem to be going relatively fast here, just like Russia. And to top off things, it's designed as a first strike weapon. So we've thought about that. We talked about it last week right here on this program. An EMP would give an enemy, an attacking enemy, as much as 10 to 15 minutes in which to attack us, where no one would know, no one would see anything unless you happen to be standing out on the sidewalk and you watch a cruise missile go by. What could you do about it? Nothing. Can't call anybody. Can't tell anybody. What are you going to do? Run down to the city hall and they're going to run down to the National Guard office? You're talking a couple of hours. By then it's too late. Cruise missiles can travel between 600 and 4,000 miles an hour. That's a lot of ground covered. In 15 minutes, you know how far a cruise missile can travel at 600 miles an hour, right? Do the math. That's 150 miles. 150 miles is a long way. Long way from the time you saw it. The People's Liberation Army textbook, they have one too. Do I have a link? I think I have the link here. No, well, let's see. Hang on a second. Yes, I do. I have the link. So I'm going to leave that in my notes too. The textbook's called The Third World War, Total Information Warfare. And the author is Shen Guang. And he notes the importance of developing China's EMP defenses to neutralize and check the U.S. if needed. Now, EMP defenses are a little bit different. You got to have three things to have a defense against an EMP. The first thing you have to have is warning. You have to have early warning. Because if you have early warning, you can disconnect key equipment from the network. You can disconnect the bus bars and in the substations. You can disconnect computers. You can put things into a cage of some kind to protect them. Warning. That's the first thing. The second thing you have to have is you must have the technology. You have to have the technology to protect your most delicate electronics from damage. And the third thing, in the case that A, your protections don't work, or B, you don't have enough, is spare parts. You have to have spare parts. Because if you burn up a control board on, let's say the switchgear in your substation, it has a watt meter. It tells the power system how much energy is going through the switchgear, how much energy is going through the transformer, what is the voltage, what is the frequency. You can get this information off these small circuit boards. The circuit boards have a range of analog or digital information that goes out, either 0 to 3 volts, 0 to 5 volts, 1 to 10 volts, or 4 to 20 milliamps. If that board fries, you don't get that information. And you can't just run electrical equipment blind. You're going to look outside and something's going to be glowing red hot. Everything has to be monitored. And so these control boards, even though they only cost 10 or 15 bucks, without it, you're out. You're down. So you have to have that third thing, spare parts. You got to have spare boards, and you have to have them in protective envelopes so that after the pulse, you can race all these guys out there, not in their electric cars, but their good old gas-powered cars, and replace the boards so that you can bring your equipment back up. Spare parts. Warning, protection, spare parts. Without that, you're going to lose. And I don't think we have that everywhere. I don't think we do. And let's not forget about Iran. Now, Iran is not really afraid. They know they're not going to live forever. They know, the mullahs know that they're not going to keep being reelected by the Persian people. The Persian people are going to revolt and take them out. But when it comes to the global syndicate, they have a military arm, which right now is the CCP, but it also uses Iran. It also uses aspects of our own intelligence agencies. Yeah, I know, you're going, wait a minute, I thought we were the good guys. We are, but there are bad guys inside of all of our agencies. In Iran, not only are EMP attacks fully endorsed, but battle plans for their use are being drawn up as well. I know this because I've talked about them right here on this program. Their military textbook is called Passive Defense. I don't have the link. I don't think I do. No. It was published in 2010. It echoes Russian General Slipchenko's ideas on electromagnetic weapons. Former director of the CIA, James Woolsey, points out that Tehran's military is planning to be able to make a nuclear EMP attack. A lot of people say, well, they don't even have nuclear weapons yet, and they haven't even tested anything like this, so how can they do it? Well, they don't have to. Other nations have. And the Iranians are not stupid people. They're smart. I've worked with Iranian engineers before. A little temperamental, yes, but smart. And they're quite capable. So are the Pakistanis. Now, the Pakistanis have accomplished something the Iranians have not. They are nuclear capable. Yeah. You know, only 9 countries in the whole world have figured out how to do this, and Iran's not one of them. So the knowledge can be passed along. Anyway, Woolsey went on to say, and I'm going to quote here, passive defense and other Iranian military writings are well aware that nuclear EMP attack is the most efficient way of killing people through secondary effects over the long run. You're not blowing them up. You're starving them to death. You're making them fight one another to survive. You're turning them into cannibals. The rationale appears to be that people starve to death not because of EMP, but because they live in a materialistic society dependent upon modern technology. Other Iranian military journal, in an article entitled, let's see what's this called, Electronics to Determine the Fate of Future Wars. Yeah, I like the names of these stuffs. I don't have the link to this one either. I'm sorry. Anyway, it notes that the key to defeating the United States is through an EMP attack. Well, we knew about this in the 70s, bozos. The article goes on to say, if the world's industrial countries fail to devise effective ways to defend themselves against dangerous electronic assaults, then they will disintegrate within a few years. American soldiers would not be able to find food to eat, nor will they be able to fire a single shot. Hard to argue with, except that a good old rifle doesn't require any electronics. Now, I don't think it's a veiled threat. No, I really don't. What I will expressly state is that Iran is gearing up for the capability, and the capability is the same as the prospect. It's sort of like what really preserves freedom in America? Yes, exactly right. It's the armed American. It's not the armies. It's not the National Guard. It's not the cops. Now, certainly ain't the damn judges. What preserves freedom in America? It's the armed American. Well, how can you say that? I mean, we don't have to go to the streets with rifles and hold back an oppressive government. No, but the prospect is there. The prospect is there. Now, Virtual Joe and his gang of criminals call that a veiled threat, and that's why they say that white supremacists or patriots or whatever, they're the extremists. They're the real threat. No, we're not a threat. We're no more a threat than a mousetrap is a threat. If you trigger the trap, if you march into the room full of traps, yeah, you're going to get your toes snapped. You're going to get your head bashed in. But the mousetraps ain't going anywhere. We're not leaving our neighborhoods. We're not marching. Even if we did march, we wouldn't know where to march. We don't have a leader. Nobody's leading us. Now you understand what I'm talking about. It's the prospect. That's what Iran is trying to become, the prospect. It's a veiled threat, yes, but it's only a possibility, and it keeps nations in check. Ambassador Henry Cooper, former director of the Strategic Defense Initiative, which is what broke the Soviet Union in the first place, turned out to all be fake, but hey, it was a good PR plan. He also warned that some Iranian satellite launches appear to be practice for such an attack against the U.S. Launching an ICBM is very similar to launching a satellite. And Iranians have been successful launching satellites into low Earth orbit, as have been the North Koreans. They have 2 satellites up there that haven't made a peep since they were put up. Oh, we watched them. We listened very closely, but they haven't made a peep. We don't know what's in them. We don't know what they're used for. We don't know what the purpose is of them, but they were launched. First time, by the way. Yeah, after the Clintons gave them the missile technology, that was it. So, I mean, what did you expect from North Korea, right? They're going to make the list. On April of 2013, the first satellite, which was the KMS-3 satellite, it orbited the U.S. at the perfect trajectory to evade U.S. early warning radars and national missile defenses. First try. They did it. And all while, all the ideal altitude and location to launch an EMP field attack over the continental U.S. Like I said, we don't know what's in these satellites. They may have a 10 megaton warhead in them. We don't know. We haven't detected it. We don't dare shoot it down. Anyway, a week later, 7 days, now we're not talking 7 months, 7 days later, they did it again. Another perfect launch, perfect placement. This time, the orbiting satellite over the D.C. New York City corridor. And if the EMP had been activated, we would have lost the entire eastern grid, where 75% of the U.S. electricity comes from. We're talking about everything that goes through, yep, that's what I mentioned in the book, Nashville, Tennessee. Nashville, Tennessee is the main switch, let's call it the spinal cord uh, of the American grid. I know you're going, what, Tennessee? No. Think about it. The TVA, the Tennessee Valley Authority. They could do what they wanted because the land was there. You see, what happened was, and the president, rightly so, but we know there were ulterior motives. What he said was, if we build infrastructure, electrical infrastructure, because a lot of these areas, they didn't have electricity. If we build electrical infrastructure, those areas will then grow. People will be attracted there because they could build houses and, set stores up and they'll go. And so the TVA was put in before the people could even afford it. The Tennessee Valley Authority was done under government money. And it was successful. But it was also way less expensive to do than in other places in the country because all the land could easily be acquired through eminent domain. Because it was wide open spaces, bunch of farmland. And they just took it and they built their system and they dammed up lakes and they put in nuclear power plants and the TVA. So the TVA and what they set up there in Tennessee, in the Tennessee Valley, goes from Upper Cumberland, all the way down to pretty close to Atlanta. It's the most sophisticated and solid grid in the world. But it's also not modernized to be defended against an EMP. So, anyway, 3 months later, we're up to April 16th of 2013. Just a few months later, in July of 2013, now keep in mind this is all during Barack Obama's presidency, so all of these secrets were disseminated. All of the non-interventionist lead from behind kind of policies were in place during that period. It could not have happened any other way. In July of 2013, the North Korean freighter was found in the Panama Canal after passing through the Gulf of Mexico with 2 SA-2 missiles mounted on their launchers hidden under bags of sugar. They were ready to fire. Now, while the missiles weren't armed at the time, they were the type that could very easily have been armed, and they could have been used to execute anonymous EMP attacks via an offshore freighter. Now, at the House hearing on October 12th, 2017, which was after Trump became president, but wasn't really accepted as president, was fought by all 17 intelligence agencies for months. The experts warned members of Congress. Experts warned members of Congress that a North Korean EMP attack could kill 90% of Americans within 1 year, calling it an existential threat. I don't know about 90%, but I'm very confident with my 30% number. Think about it. That's a lot. That's a lot. That's 99 million people. Take a long time to bury that dead, and they would be the most vulnerable. And so what about in the States now? Electrical power lobbyists are fighting against the EMP protection. They say it's expensive, it's unnecessary, it will make it less efficient, you can't expand it, it makes it, in some cases, unsafe. And so they're lobbying against it because they don't want to do it. They don't want to protect the grid in Washington, let alone anywhere else. It seems like the rest of the world is doing exactly the opposite. They are getting ready. They are protecting their grids. And this doesn't seem to make much sense to me and to anybody else that I discuss this with. But it isn't all bad news. President Donald Trump seems to have been the first president ever since Reagan, and Reagan was not really empowered to do anything because he did not control Congress. Remember, John Foley was an avowed enemy of President Reagan, and President Reagan had a hard time getting things done through him. Speaker of the House, Tip O'Neill. So anyway, he was the first one to have done anything to better prepare the U.S. against EMP attacks, but he only had 4 years, and he was being fought all the way by the establishment party. So anyway, on October 13th, President Donald Trump signed Executive Order 13744. I have the link to that in here too, and you can read that. I'm not going to share the details of it with you, but here's the gist of it. Coordinating efforts to prepare the nation for space weather events. This is kind of cloaked to mean the sun could get angry and cause an EMP, so we're going to get ready for that. Now, while most of this certainly was not directed toward EMP preparedness, the fact of the matter is that space weather and EMP preparedness, they overlap. He was smart. He went around all of the lobbyists and all of the activists and all the crazies and said, look, we're talking about a temperamental sun here. We're not talking about an attack by your benefactor, by who got you elected and pays for your campaigns and puts your daughter into private school and pays for your wife's cosmetic surgery. We're not talking about that. But a few short years later, 2019, Trump signed Executive Order 13865. Now, this was a hell of a piece of legislation. If it was legislation, it would be great. Too bad it had to be an executive order. Coordinating national resilience to electromagnetic pulses. Yeah, it's a little more defined, isn't it? It was here that EMP preparedness seemed to become a priority of the U.S. military. Now, shortly after this order was signed, the Department of Homeland Security began investigating research-proven techniques to better protect critical American infrastructure against EMP attacks. Likely the most significant step that the U.S. government has taken to date to defend itself against an EMP. Yeah, big stuff. It's not something that is, easily done. And there was a lot of opposition to it, and that was a big deal, and it hurt him. By the way, thanks so much in the Foxhole chat room. There's a lot of stuff. Biden is owned by, what is it? CHYANA. He'll do it. Cheney, maybe. I don't know. Yeah, mentioning Paul Ryan and all of that. So I can't keep up with all the chats, but I'm trying to. We have about 2 minutes left in this segment, and I'll finish this. So here are my final thoughts on this. So while the U.S. has taken some steps to better research what we can do to protect ourselves against EMP, it doesn't appear as if we're anywhere near as ready as many other nations worldwide, particularly those who would love to see America fail. Now, what conclusion can we draw from such? Well, I would say, first of all, they're not going to get attacked. Nobody gives a rat's ass about attacking Brazil with an EMP weapon, okay? Nobody cares about attacking Spain. Nobody's going to attack Germany or France or Greece. It ain't going to happen. They don't care about that. They care about one target and one target only, and that's us. So what conclusions can we draw from this? Well, I'll leave it up to you to decide, but you got to know this. For the moment, it looks as if we're showing up to a fight empty-handed. Now, it could change pretty quickly. You can make a Faraday cage. I don't think it's that difficult to do. Substations are our most vulnerable interface with the grid. The grid is going to take care of itself. Nuclear power plants can be taken down. They have all kinds of fail-safes, all kinds. They don't hold up so well against earthquakes or volcanoes or tsunamis, but they hold up really well when it comes to electronic interference. They're modern. They have a lot of money. The DOE primarily focuses its efforts on protecting and sustaining nuclear power plants. Just trying to see how I can take care of them. All right, they're muted. Now, speaking of China, you don't want to be caught too healthy in China. Yeah, at the sound of gunshots, prisoners fell lifeless to the ground, their bodies still warm, were carried to a nearby white van where two white-clad doctors awaited. Close behind closed doors, these people were sliced open. Their organs were carved out for sale on the transplant market. Now, the grisly scene, which sounds more like the plot of a horror movie, took place in China more than 20 years ago at the direction of state authorities. It was witnessed by a police officer who provided security at the execution sites where death row prisoners were executed. Now, the harvesting of death row prisoners' organs was an open secret, but it's way worse than that. He described being an unwitting participant in an industrialized supply chain that converts living humans into products for sale in the organ industry. If you recall, when Haiti was hit by the earthquake, the very first planes, the relief planes that landed 8 hours after the quake. Now, these planes were stocked. They were ready to go. They were already put together, already had staffs chosen and trained. 8 hours after the quake, they landed in Haiti. And they were able to set up triage and hospital operations in Haiti. These planes are extremely sophisticated, operating rooms and all kinds of stuff. And they set up triage tents. One of my associates runs an organization that stocks, they design and built and stock tractor trailer rigs. The trailer rig is a hospital. Now, this thing is amazing. It could pull onto site. You could fold down the sides and you can expand the tent, and it becomes a sterile work area of a small hospital. The operating rooms and x-ray rooms are inside the actual tractor trailer, but all the other tables, all the other gear is out on the ground, under the tent, under lights, UV and others, and it's a full operation. These kinds of operations went to Haiti 8 hours after the quake. And yeah, they were fixing people, but they were packing up organs and flying out almost on an hourly basis. And these planes came from Israel. The planes came from Israel. And they landed, brought doctors, nurses, all those people. And they hauled eyes and organs and everything out of there by the ton. By the ton. This is an industrialized supply chain that converts human organs into money. The former officer used a pseudonym in sharing his experience to protect his safety. His account from the mid-1990s sheds light on one stage in the disturbing evolution of the CCP's long-running practice of harvesting organs from non-consenting donors. They're alive. He witnessed organ extraction from prisoners. Some were already dead, and some were not. Bob joined the police force in 1996, worked as a civilian police officer. From time to time, he assisted in maintaining order at a court where executions are confirmed and various execution sites in the city. And later in 1999, as a result of online posts critical of the authority, of an online post critical of the authorities. He himself was put into a detention center for a year, and inside he was able to observe the handling of death row prisoners, and thus piece together the process from conviction to execution to organ harvesting. After being sentenced to death, an inmate would be slapped in the hand and ankle cuffs, the latter weighing up to 33 pounds to prevent a possible escape. One of two other prisoners would keep them on watch at all times, a blood test, a step to identify possible donors, and a checkup on their mental and physical health would also run during this time at a dedicated medical room in the detention center. He said, as far as I know, no one told the death row prisoners their organs would be extracted. Let's go ahead and see if we can add truth frequency back in. Make it a lot easier. This would be so easier. All right, here we go. We used to do this with one flick of a button. It was so simple to do. Now it's very difficult to do. And I have to do it because there is no Mr. Producer. I am the producer. Yeah. All right, now I don't seem to be able to make it possible. That is very frustrating. But it is what it is. I don't know. The call board's still open, but I don't know if the TFR people can hear or not. So this organ harvesting is a big deal, and it's only grown from there as they have captured political prisoners. We have 500 political prisoners in Washington, and they don't have to fear that. They're being mistreated. They're being tortured. And I don't think majority of them are going to suffer from PTSD, but I can tell you every single one of them should sue the hell out of the federal government when they get out. And they will get out. They will get out. All right, let's... The point is that the machine in China is running, and it's running a full blast. Let's see here. He aligns with those of multiple other eyewitnesses who took part in the opaque organ transplant business in China. George Zheng, a former Chinese medical intern, recalled assisting in an organ removal operation in the 1990s alongside 2 nurses and 3 military doctors in a mountainous area near an army prison close to Dalian, a city in northeastern China. The patient, a young man, was unresponsive, but his body was still warm. The doctors had removed 2 kidneys from the man and then instructed Zheng to extract his eyes. And at that moment, his eyelids moved, and he looked at me. There was sheer terror in his eyes. My mind went blank, and my whole body began to shake. The memories of those 2 eyes haunted Zheng for years. In 1995, ethnic Uyghur Dr. Enver Tohti from the far west Xinjiang region similarly helped 2 chief surgeons to extract the liver and 2 kidneys from a live prisoner who had just been shot in the chest. There was bleeding. He was still alive, but I didn't feel guilty. In fact, I didn't feel anything but like a full programmed robot doing its task. I thought I was carrying out my duty to eliminate the enemy of the state. The surgeons later told him to remember that nothing happened. A seemingly on-demand organ transplant trade appears to be continuing in recent years in hospitals around Xinjiang, where Bob once worked, based on investigations by the World Organization to Investigate the Persecution of Falun Gong, a U.S.-based nonprofit. One nurse from the first affiliated hospital of Xinjiang University told the, she's called the WOIPFG. This is the Persecution of Falun Gong nonprofit. That in 2019, their hospital ranked among the country's top 5 in terms of kidney transplantation, and they did about 400 surgeries the previous year. We haven't stopped since the Chinese New Year and haven't taken any days off, she told undercover investigators posing as prospective organ transplantees, adding that they had a kidney match that day. Another doctor from the hospital, during a phone call in 2017, told undercover investigators they did most of the liver transplant surgeries overnight as soon as they arrived. If you don't utilize these times and only do them during the daytime, how can you possibly do so many surgeries? How can you outcompete the other folks? The organ transplant abuse Bob witnessed had sickened him and went against his values, which helped him make up his mind to quit less than 3 years into the job. I would have quit about 3 minutes into the job. Despite having long left the police force, Bob now saw no reason that the forced organ transplant industry would ever stop. Driven by enormous profits, there is no place for the so-called human rights and humanitarian concerns. It's a big deal. Big deal. A lot of people losing their lives over this. All right. Let's see. What do we got going in the chat room? It is July 4th, and the chat room is just busting. Yeah, exactly. I'm totally with you. He opened his eyes, and both kidneys are gone, and he overhears somebody say, "Yeah, take his eyes too. Now let's get his eyes." Yeah, I'm sorry about that, Scott. I did correct myself. I did say Virtual Joe and his band of criminals. I did correct it. I'm sorry. It was a moment of inattention. A moment of inattention. Let's do something really quick here because we got a bunch of people in D Live. I'm going to go ahead and bulk this up a little bit. I'll tell you what. It's Independence Day. What do you say we bulk this up to about 150 lemons? How about that? Huh? That's a pretty good amount, isn't it? Pretty close to 160. Here we go. We're going to distribute them. So they'll go out now. In about 30 seconds, we find out who the lucky winners are in D Live. And I want to talk about the truest meaning of Independence Day. It's a good season. It is a good celebration. I watched a video today where there was a North Carolina choir, and they positioned themselves in the center of this 16-story building, which has a center open courtyard that goes all the way up. So the hallway walks all the way around the outside. And they took advantage of the acoustics of this building, and they sang the national anthem in there. Oh, wow, was it beautiful. It was so touching, just brought a tear to the eye. Okay, here are our winners. Old Dog, 45.3 lemons. And what is that? Flawless in the USA. Okay. Flawless in the USA, 26.4. Houston Baylor, 19.3. Big D, 1955, 15.6. And Vonnie Kinsey, 13.2. You guys should be getting pretty close to the Mercedes-Benz now. You've been winning consistently over all the other people on D-Live. Thank you so much for being there today. And if I ever figure out how to do it in Foxhole, I actually don't know how to do this, but evidently I'm accumulating gold pills, and they're adding up week after week. I have no idea how to distribute them. I'm going to have to YouTube it or something, figure out how to distribute the gold pills back to my loyal listeners in Foxhole. Don't really know how to do that. And that's a good question, Blondie. What about Hong Kong? Why don't they fight back? Well, see, Hong Kong doesn't have an army. Hong Kong doesn't have a navy. Hong Kong is at the end of a bridge. And what happened was when the Chinese authorities came in, they said, well, anybody arrested for, criticizing the state, or they're going to have to be taken to China and to await trial. Well, they didn't want to do that because they figured, if you go to China, you're going to end up in an organ hacking room, and you're never going to be heard from again because nobody cares about Chinese. All they care about is the CCP. And these are a lot of them are smart kids. Very smart, very computer literate, and very passionate, and they have very wealthy parents. And they decided to protest. That's all they could do. They could protest, they could sing the national anthem, and they could beg for help, which they did. They begged for help from the U.S. And we didn't get involved because China said, don't you dare. Don't you dare get involved in this. If you do, it's going to be hell to pay. We're going to go to war. It's going to be very bad. Now, the British are supposedly there to protect Hong Kong. They're the Navy. Their Navy protects Hong Kong against invasion or whatever, but they didn't stop China either. And so now we haven't heard a peep out of Hong Kong, and those protesters are all long gone or scared to death. Some of them knew that they were going to die, and they were loyal, they were faithful, they were American right to the very end. And this is something that it's difficult to take. I don't think Hong Kong could fight back. Now, it's a different story with Taiwan. Taiwan has their own stuff. We've been sending them missiles, rockets, grenades, jets, technology, and they've helped us build our technology and helped us made our technology better. They don't supply diddly squat to China. And they consider themselves an independent country, but China considers them, and anyone who goes along with that idea considers them an enemy if they do. So what is the real meaning? I mean, the centerpiece of the recently defeated Senate Bill 1, this H.R. 1, Senate Bill 1, which was the nationalization of the voting laws, right? The states would have no more control over their voting laws. And it would be unlimited mail-in voting everywhere. Anybody could vote, no IDs necessary, we don't check signatures, just lick them and stick them, and lick them and stick them, and we'll count them. Now, it would have taken away from the states' rights ability given to them by the Constitution to govern their own elections. And this has been there since we were 13 colonies. The assertion of the founders of this country was this. George Washington put it in a letter to the Newport Jewish congregation. It is not true that by the indulgence of one class of people, that another enjoyed the exercise of their inherent natural rights. Rather, in the words of the Declaration of Independence, all people are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, which give them the right to establish and to change governments. Now, in this conception, the more centralized the government is, the further away it is from legitimacy. That's why we break it up into 50 pieces. That's why we have 50 individual popular elections, and the winner takes it all for that individual state. That's called a republic. In order to allow a centralized government that does not subvert the power structure for its own ends, the framers of the Constitution assured Americans in the Bill of Rights that the national government possessed only those powers that were specifically delegated to it by the people in the Constitution. All the other powers, spoken or unspoken, in their fullness, are with the states. That's the 10th Amendment. That's the 10th Amendment. And the proponents of absolutism reject such limits on their own power. In their state, The fullness of political power belongs to the absolute ruler or rulers, and everyone else enjoys whatever freedoms they have at the sole pleasure of the ruler, who is perfectly free to cancel them anytime he wants. So that's why when we were thinking about, Trump building the wall, we were all behind it. We were all for it. We wanted to get going. Delays were killing us. And they didn't want the wall. They wanted a virtual wall. They wanted a drone wall. They wanted a, whatever. It's kind of, let's watch them on cameras and from satellites. We don't have to build a physical wall. That's stupid. Because the ruler could just cancel that. And that is exactly what we saw. Now, none of the 500 and something miles of wall that President Donald Trump put up was taken down, but there are big holes in it. And once we got a new ruler, once Virtual Joe and his gang of criminals were put into power, they just turned on the floodlights at the holes in the wall and said, y'all come on through. The founders knew of these kinds of rulers. They come along. I mean, they were smart. They were students of history. They escaped a country that did just exactly that very thing. And during the lifetimes of most of the founders, Napoleon would initiate modern absolutism, complete with an imperial law code that reviewed absolutism as a great force in the world. But while Washington, Adams, Jefferson all used and developed the great powers of the presidency, the idea of government by consent of the governed held. It stayed together. And it stayed together because it was based on one thing. It was based on the assertion, the reality, that government was afraid of its people. Government was afraid of its people. It feared the people. And that's why it behaved itself. If the government stops fearing the people, tyranny erupts. It erupts like a bad case of shingles. Okay? There is a profound truth embodied in our Constitution's federalism. The centuries-old Book of Splendor, which is in the Zohar, by the way, speaks of the attainment of peace in this world as the making of one within one. The organization of the universe is such that we govern best by governing ourselves first, making ourselves a one, a whole, integrated person. The all-encompassing oneness does not rule by obliterating our own small wholeness and integrity, but rather the wholeness of our own microcosm is in the image and form of the divine wholeness that embraces all things. Now, in a very familiar way, the framers of the Constitution embraced the model nested wholeness. Wholeness, right? They envision the good national order as springing from the good order of each constituent state, which in order to turn springs from the good order of its own citizens, as each state is guaranteed a republican form of government. Now, there could be corruption on the state level. There most certainly is. Look at New York. Look at Illinois. Come on. Look at Louisiana. God, the most corrupt governments on the face of the earth. But they're states. They are states. They're not the central government. They're not all powerful. The people can rise up and overthrow them. They can change. Look what's happening to Michael Madigan. Finally, gosh, after all these years, finally, that organized criminal is going to be out. And hopefully the rest of the organized crime in the Chicago political structure goes with him. It didn't happen in New York. A lot of those people that got Hillary Clinton elected in New York as a senator, they went to prison. They went to jail for corruption. Now, it never did spread as far as to Hillary, but, that's what I'm saying. In the states, corruption does occur. But you also have good states. You have good states. You have North Carolina, South Carolina. You have, portions of Virginia and Pennsylvania and Florida, Texas certainly, and that balances it out. Once you have one government that tells everybody what the way it has to be as far as voting, it is a recipe for disaster. Now, the long and continuous tradition of law in the West has taught us how complex a process it is to keep political power righteous, or at least not evil, okay? Even though we think of it that way, and we do see it, especially in terrible things like George Floyd and etc. In the American English law tradition, there is a continuous deep engagement with the mighty problems of having freedom and having a government strong enough to protect it against those who don't care about it, or don't care about liberty. They don't want people to be free. They don't want them to think for themselves. They don't want them to be able to move for themselves or choose for themselves. Today, there is a reemergence of those who, in the mood of the 19th century romanticism, wish to just embrace a single idea and not be wearied by all the other things about gay rights, about abortion, about, on, and they want to be just one thing. I'm focused on abortion. I'm focused on, states' rights. I'm focused on, voting. But it is more than that. It gets complex. And complexity is the cloak of mediocrity. And once you start putting bribes and blackmail and compromise, then it gets very difficult to manage. We are many years past seeing people gunned down trying to escape from East Berlin, and even further from Stalin's gulags and mass executions of Mao Zedong. Blessedly, no new Nazi regime has arisen, and the only reason it hasn't is because no charismatic has risen to take it over. Because the idea that there's one master race out there, it's certainly alive and well. The only thing it lacks is a leader, a charismatic leader to stand up and lead it. We would probably take that person out before that happened. I mean, Alexander Solzhenitsyn not being read much more anymore, and certainly not being talked about in most schools, and with our homes filled with Chinese goods and our treasury held up by Chinese credit, communism doesn't inspire the same revulsion, especially among the young. They don't care. They think China's okay. They think buying Chinese clothes and shipping factories to China and a minimum guaranteed wage from the government, that's all good. Bring it on. It is fashionable in many circles to emulate the reduction of morality to ideological conformance. Devote yourself to the one correct idea, and you'll always be right. And the devotees, the followers, the disciples of these single-focus ideologies, they're whacked. They're crazy. You don't want to have anything to do with them. They're strange. And they assume their own correctness. They outsource moral introspection to other people, to Adam Schiff, to Nancy Pelosi. The looming result is an economy and a culture that's undercut by a kind of radical consumerism that is willing to default toward totalitarianism as long as it delivers a sense of, instant gratification without sacrifice to the people, which is exactly what they do. The cheapness of it all is actually becoming apparent. It's not going to hold up. It cannot last. It will fall apart. And I think in the end, that's what they want anyway. Independence Day is still speaking its message. You don't believe me? I listened to fireworks for the last hour right outside my window. People still believe in the original grievances that were filed against King George and in the battle to set this country free. In every sporting event where we sing that song, people are moved. They're moved. As we leave the made-for-TV virus year, let's call it, there are whiffs of fresh air about. And the watchman cries, the morning comes. Thank God we can take these masks off. And hopefully the fascists will all be brought to trial, and they will all be convicted, and they will all be executed for having put us through it. I'm just telling you, it has to happen. A la Nuremberg. You know, a lot of those people that swung, it was a year. It was over a year of executions. And a lot of those people were news actors. They were news actors. They were the fascists. They were the people that forced the experimentation upon the people. They injected people with experimental drugs. They hung. They didn't just put them in jail for the rest of their life. They swung them. And you know what? War is justice denied. Justice has to come. It has to. Let's see. I want to talk about... I'll cover that maybe later. I want to talk a little bit about Epstein Island. How much time do we have left here? Oh, wow. We only have half an hour. Gosh, this night has gone so fast. We got about a minute and a half, and TFR is going to go on break. But what's happening now is what I call the Epstein documents. They're being released because various judges are saying it's okay to release them. There are millions of pages, but you're going to die when you hear this, okay? This isn't out there in the mainstream news. I would say the fake stream news, but we are the mainstream news because you're listening and you are America. So young girls and boys were transported to a tropical paradise where they could not escape. I mean, why would they want to, you think? They get great food. They get access to all the stuff mom forbids. They get to wear fancy clothes or no clothes. All they have to do is run around in skimpy clothing and have a blast. Like kids, right? The visitors were brought there for a very different reason. Oh, they thought they were going to have orgies and take drugs for days, and no one was going to tell. But the managers had something else in mind. Every square inch of that island was filmed and monitored. Every bathroom, every bedroom, and every pool. The design was very clear. Blackmail. The list of names that went to the island is bad. It's bad. I'm going to share it with you in just a second. It's huge. And not everyone was caught doing what they shouldn't be doing because they were smart and they were rightfully very scared. But you have to go to sleep sometime, right? And that's when the photo fun begins. I don't know how much you follow or buy into conspiracy theories, because eventually they kind of almost all prove out to be true, right? And then they're no longer conspiracy theories. But for me, I'm naturally skeptical about these things until I can do enough research to make an informed decision. I'm a sauce guy. I need to see the evidence. And some people, on the other hand, are much more willing to go with the flow and describe, subscribe to any conspiracy theory that comes along more readily than I am. I mean, all kinds of stuff. JFK Jr.'s alive. My jury's out. I'm not saying one way or the other. Maybe Vincent Fusca is JFK Jr. I don't know. One of my friends is down in Florida, took 2 pictures with him in the last little bit. So I know he exists. But one of the conspiracy theories that many people have come to accept this year is involving sex trafficking and and the made-for-TV virus. I think by now we all acknowledge that there is sex trafficking and there's a huge organized ring that exists and it's going on and it's global, right? There's no conspiracy theory about that. There's no lack of documentation on that. And there's also a virus that's going around as well, too, but there are some who are connecting these two together. The theory is that the virus is a means by which to better able to capture the pedophiles. Now you think about it, putting everybody in solitary confinement, preventing the free and open movement of people, and you isolate them. Now, I, for one, don't buy into this so far, but I'm listening. I do believe that, since capturing Jeffrey Epstein, and whether he killed himself or whether he didn't, he's gone, and Ghislaine Maxwell, there are a lot of people who are afraid, and they're afraid they're going to be exposed and they're going to be put in jail. Oh, yeah. And when I say a lot of people, I'm going to name some names here. They're going to surprise you. There have been a lot of documents released in the last few days regarding Epstein's pedophile island and the Lolita Express. Once the plane gets in the air, lots of bad things happen to little kids. There's a huge list of people who have either flown on Epstein's plane to the island or they have been to the island. And this compiled list of names from Epstein's Island flight logs, and this is just the first 200 pages. There are 2,000 pages of names. But I think you'll recognize some of these people. Of course, you recognize John Podesta and Anthony Weiner, of course. Steven Spielberg, of course. The Bronfmans, right? Sarah and Claire. Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Maximilian Chow, who is related by marriage to Mitch McConnell. Of course, Val Kilmer. Marina Abramovich, you know who she is, right? I don't even want to talk about her. But these are the list of visitors actually to Epstein Island. I'm not going to give you all of them, but there's Bill Murray, there's Ehud Barak, there's Woody Allen. What's another name? Oh, Sandy Berger, you would know him. Let's see. Mouse is jumping around a little bit. These names go on and on and on. But the point is, and there are names that you would not suspect, having gone there and probably have files on these people. Alan Dershowitz, Tom Hanks, Jimmy Kimmel, Barack Obama, Kevin Spacey, Oprah Winfrey, Beyonce, Chrissy Teigen, Jim Carrey, Ben Affleck. Let's see here. Will Smith. That one surprised me. Demi Moore. And there are names that I don't have on this list, but I do know Robert Downey Jr., Alec Baldwin, and Courtney Love. And, the Disney Corporation was offering kids scuba diving trips to the Epstein Island. And, of course, Bill Clinton and Hillary Clinton. And by the way, Hannah Montana. You remember Hannah Montana, the TV show with the super talented singer, actress, Miley Cyrus? She went to Epstein Island when she was, I think, 14. And Miley, when she left the island, she began her porno music career. She totally changed. That's what happens on the island. I am going to include the link in case you don't have it. It's not out there in the public. But I'm going to include the link to the entire 2,000-page document. I'm not going to go over all of it tonight, but you can. I'm going to leave the link in my notes. You can get the notes. Yes, the fireworks are going off outside right now. Right. New technology out there. I'm kind of interested in this. People said, is there anything about your physical appearance that you would change? Well, you could probably fill up the chat room with that, right? 2 things I would wish for. 2 things, and I don't think they can be accomplished, but if they could, it'd be worth it. One would be to get rid of this belly. I know. You'll write me with all kinds of things that you can drink or eat or stick up. No, it doesn't work, okay? It's just the way I'm built. And the other is to have a full head of hair like I had when I was young. Those 2 things, that's the only 2. See, that's not hard to do, right? That's not a big list. I'm not a demanding person. That's pretty good. My wallet and my wife. I get it. That's not bad, Danny. That's intelligent. There are things about us that we would change, and we do. Women color their hair. Men creatively shave their face or their heads, and we take all kinds of performance-enhancing whatever, and run, and we work out, and we do sit-ups, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. I look at the pictures of people back in 1965. There were no fat people. There were no overweight people. You take that same street view today down in Miami or on the beach in California, same view, and I guarantee you 75% of the people are fat, and 25% of them are medically obese. To me, medically obese is 100 pounds overweight. 100 pounds. So if you're 6 feet tall and you got, big broad shoulders and decent sized bones, you could comfortably be quick and good looking in clothes at 225 pounds. Oh yeah. I mean, I have 18-inch arms. My shoulders are 48 inches. I got a lot of muscle on this body. I've built it up over years and years and years in the gym. I mean, I got big arms. I look at pictures of me in like on a panel with other people, and I look enormous. I look like the Rock up there. I'm not, but I do. I'm just big that way. So you can easily carry that. But I'm talking about somebody that weighs not 225, but 325. See, 100 pounds overweight is medically obese. Now you're packing around a 14-year-old. You're packing around a 12-year-old extra weight on your body. That's hard. That's hard. You got to pay for it. And you got yourself that way by eating too much. But for most of us, hair naturally loses pigment as we get older. For most of us, it doesn't for Jen. She's still got beautiful long blonde hair and has never colored her hair. And she's basically the same age as me. I think I'm just a scunch younger than her. We often think that stress may also play a role, and it can. But until now, that's been the assumption. It hasn't actually been demonstrated in humans until this new study. Gray and white hair is typically caused by the pigment cells in our hair follicles slowly dying. And that usually happens as we get older, which means there's a lack of the pigment melanin. However, there's some evidence that other factors can influence melanin production too. While scientists have made the link between stress and gray hair in mice, it's never been conclusively proven to happen in humans, and the latest study involving 14 volunteers offers some strong evidence that this really does occur. Furthermore, it appears that once people are under less stress, the hair color comes back. And while the researchers don't suggest that age-related grayness can be undone, these findings could teach us something about the biological processes of getting older. Understanding the mechanisms that allow old gray hairs to return to their young pigmented states could yield new clues about the malleability of human aging in general and how it is influenced by stress. It could be. I mean, my hair from head to toe turned snow white in 5 weeks. It was dark brown. My hair was dark brown on my head. My eyebrows were dark brown. All my body hair was dark brown, and I was tan as a biscuit. 6 weeks later, I was snow white. Every bit of hair on my body turned snow white. It just changed. It didn't fall out, didn't grow out that way. It just changed, all of it. And it ain't coming back. I underwent something, and it lit me up from the inside and turned everything white. So I wasn't going to bring this story. How much time do I have? Do I really have to do this story? Yes, I do. Okay, let's see if I can approach this. Because this is getting into politics, and it wasn't for a long time. It was in the schools. It was in movies. It was in books. It was in music. It was in social mores, but it wasn't into politics. But a Nebraska mother was sentenced Monday of last week for sexually assaulting 2 of her young daughter's friends. They were boys. Christina Greer, she's 38. Not bad looking. Nice looking 38-year-old woman. She faces up to 102 years in prison after she was found guilty of sexually assaulting a 12-year-old and a 13-year-old boy in 2018. Now, Greer said in court Monday that she's so ashamed and sorry. During sleepovers at her home from 2017 to 2018, Greer gave her daughter and her friends alcohol and marijuana gummy bears before having sex with the 2 boys. Not just once. Having sex with an adult female is thought of, that's the cool kid in the group. It's not just the case in these situations, said the deputy attorney, according to this report. They've been bullied. They've transferred schools multiple times. It's just unfortunate they have to continue to deal with it. Now, they weren't being bullied by the woman. They were being bullied by kids in school, okay, because it got out. The children were told not to tell anyone about the sexual encounters and remove evidence from their phones, but one of the boys had sexual photos with Greer on his phone. Guys, look at this. She groomed them. She formed emotional relationships with kids to take advantage of them. But this woman, I'm sorry to say, is going to be defended by Virtual Joe and his gang of criminals. These boys, 12 and 13, were consensual sex with this woman. You see, the LGBTQ plus, you must know what the plus stands for. The plus stands for M, and the M means minor attracted. This woman plainly had consensual sex with minors because she was attracted to them. And that is totally legal and protected in the Biden administration. Mark my words, you are going to see this make its way to the Supreme Court, and this woman is going to be protected because this isn't rare. These women are everywhere. School teachers sleeping with high school students or middle school students. You read about it every day. And we only read about the ones that they let us read about, but this is what we're talking about. We're talking about people who are attracted to kids. No, we don't ever think about the kids as victims. They're not. According to the movement, according to the Alphabet People movement, these minors are perfectly capable of making their minds up whether they want to have sex or not. And if that happens, it's all protected. And there's more. California Attorney General Rob Bonta, California's had a string of bad attorney generals. Let's see. How about Kamala Harris? And also Becerra, right? Becerra held on to the Clinton servers and wouldn't give them up. Under subpoena, he took them to California and removed them from the state so the state couldn't investigate. We've had a string of bad attorney generals. Anyway, he announced Monday that 5 states are being added to the list of states to which California prohibits state-funded travel as a protest against their discriminatory LGBTQ laws, like, how dare you not allow men to use a woman's restroom? How dare you not allow women to dress in the same locker room as men? You see, these are discriminatory LGBTQ laws. So there are 5 states that if you're going to travel to them, you're going to trade with Arizona or you're going to trade with North Carolina, we're sorry, but you have to buy your own plane ticket and you're not going to be reimbursed for that trip. That's his way of getting back. The travel ban was instigated in 2016 when the California legislature passed Assembly Bill 1887. Here's what it says. California must take action to avoid supporting or financing discrimination against lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender people. The law is broad, prohibiting state agencies, boards, and commissions from requesting travel permissions to states that authorize any type of discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation or gender expression, or create exemptions to anti-discrimination laws affecting same-sex couples, their families, or individuals on the basis of gender identity. When the law contains certain exceptions, allowing travel to the prohibited states is the same as supporting those states. The 2016 law originally listed 12 states, including Alabama, Idaho, Iowa, Kansas, Kentucky, Mississippi, North Carolina, Oklahoma, South Carolina, South Dakota, Tennessee, and Texas. But Bonta's announcement added Florida, Arkansas, Montana, North Dakota, and West Virginia to the list, bringing the total to 17. Now, the state laws that prompted Bonta's most recent restrictions include measures passed by Arkansas, Montana, Florida, West Virginia to prevent biological boys from participating in girls' sports in schools, and an Arkansas law that prohibits physicians from providing puberty-blocking drugs, cross-sex hormones, mastectomies, penis removals, and vaginoplasties to transgender kids. Can't do that. Nope, we're not going to support you. A press release from Bonta's office said the laws directly work to ban transgender youth from playing sports, block access to life-saving care, or otherwise limit the rights of members of the LGBTQ+, this includes minor attracted, community. Bonta continued, Assembly Bill 1887 is about aligning our dollars with our values. We're in the midst of an unprecedented wave of bigotry and discrimination in this country, and the state of California is not going to support it. And that is why this woman is going to go free. Okay? It is why Christina Greer, 38, not bad looking, she's going to go free. And these 2 boys are going to have to live with it for the rest of their lives. and she's going to be free to do it to others. All right, talk a little bit about the World Economic Forum. I don't like talking about these guys either. They're just as corrupt. An international group called the World Economic Forum, they are trying to shape the world. They're trying to shape the global, regional, and industrial agendas. Okay? That's what they do. The scope of so-called harmful content that will be targeted by this global coalition for digital safety is far-reaching and encompasses both legal content, such as health information, and anti-vaccine content, and illegal content, such as child exploitation and abuse and violent extremism, which we fall into that latter category here at America Free Radio because we are extreme, and we advocate extreme. We want you to be extreme. We want you to be the extremist person you are. Inside, don't be lukewarm. Be the extreme you. Because at the end of the day, at the end of life, you only have moments. That's it. You don't get time. You don't get hours or years or decades. You get moments. So be extreme and fill your life with moments, okay? So these big tech companies, you know who they are, they already censor millions of posts, mine especially, yours. I mean, we're back on YouTube now, but for how long? I don't know. I have no idea. They consider all of this harmful. And these are under their far-reaching rules that prohibit, quote, harmful content and misinformation. They also publish detailed quarterly reports about this censorship. But according to the World Economic Forum, big tech's current metrics, recommendation systems and complaint systems, they're not good enough. They're deficient. Which is why more deliberate coordination between the public and private sector is needed. It's not good enough. We're not stopping America Free Radio. We've got to get them. The World Economic Forum intends to deliver this more deliberate coordination through its Global Coalition for Digital Safety, which is going to work to stop America Free Radio. That's what it's there for. These measures include exchanging best practices for new online safety regulations, taking coordinated action to reduce the risk of online harm, and creating global definitions of harmful content to enable standardized enforcement, reporting on one another, and measurement across regions. Oh, yeah. The members of this Global Coalition for Digital Safety include officials from, where would you think? How about Australia? How about the UK? How about Indonesia, Ukraine, Bangladesh, Singapore? An executive from the tech giant Microsoft and the founder of the artificial intelligence powered content moderation and profanity filter platform that's called Two Hat Security. Remember that? Two Hat Security. Oh, we screw with them all the time. We feed them all kinds of bad stuff. Global online safety is a collective goal, and it must be addressed by what? By working across borders. By working against nations. Yeah. We look forward to collaborating with international coalition members to reduce the risk of online harms and build a safer life online for everyone. And that means no more America Free Radio. No more truth, no more science, no more facts. Microsoft's Chief Digital Safety Officer, Courtney Gregoire, she added this. The World Economic Forum is uniquely positioned to accelerate the public-private collaboration needed to advance digital safety globally. Microsoft is eager to participate and help build whole of society solutions to this whole of society problem. One central judge of what can be said and what cannot be said. The formation of this global coalition is reflective of tech companies' increased willingness to collaborate with global governments to censor legal content that they deem to be harmful, and to push these governments to introduce more expensive speech regulations. We don't want you talking about the future. We don't want you to teach people that they can empower themselves, that they can manifest whatever they want for their lives. We don't want you to be able to do that, so we're going to censor you. You get it? Just a few months before this coalition was announced, by the way, YouTube CEO Susan Wojcicki, that's as close as I'm going to get to her name, called for global coalitions to, quote, address content that's legal but could be harmful. Yeah. And last year, Facebook CEO Mr. Zuckerberg pushed for more guidance and regulation from world leaders on what people are allowed to say online. Similar global coalitions that have attempted to create global censorship standards, such as the Global Internet Forum to Counter Terrorism, have resulted in the automated censorship of satire, media reports like America Free Radio, and other types of legal content. Oh yeah, we've been censored several times here. Well, listen, we're out of time. My name is Brooks Agnew. This is America Free Radio. And I want you to go out and look for the good in others and help it to grow a little bit every day. And before long, you will have saved the planet. We'll see you on Wednesday night at 8 p.m. Wednesday and Sunday. Every Wednesday and Sunday, we're here live on all these platforms. And thank you so much, Foxhole, for your great help tonight.